And
Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Saref Arakan, who's our partner at CHIME University, who's going to give us an overview of the components. So we just give Saref sort of 10 seconds to switch over to his audio, and hopefully his will be better than mine. I think it's improved, and I think the host has improved it, so please bear with us. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sharif Arkan, and I hope you'll be able to hear me a little bit better. Sometimes this happens. Please let us know if you're having any more problems with the audio. Fingers crossed, it should do a little bit better now. Okay, so I am a PhD student in University College London, CHIME, and I am also a developer. I've been working in software industry for about 14 years. The last 8 years in medical informatics, and today I'll try to provide you an overview of the implementation process that we've gone through. Those of you who had issues with audio should be doing better now, but please let us know if that is not the case. Okay, so what I'll try to cover today is actually a little bit more than only a demonstration session, because even though this session is named a demonstration, there are other aspects of this project around the implementation and demonstration of the widgets that we would like to share with you. Basically, I'd like to go over the scope of the project, what we wanted to do, the challenges we have faced, the architecture we used to implement the widgets, and other functionality, non-UI functionality around the widgets, and the results we've achieved, and the direction that we would like to take with you. So, basically, the scope of this project is implementing a subset of the CURIO specifications. And the CURIO specifications are focusing, as Tim has demonstrated, on a quite substantial medical domain. We are, in this project, we worked on basically 4 widgets, as you can see: medication line, medication list, drug administration chart, and single concept matching. But the scope also includes relevant standards and architectures, and we'll be discussing them too. So basically, what we're trying to do now is answer a question, and that question. Oh, by the way, I can see that there appears to be a question from Michael Bainbridge, but is that an actual question, or is just an attempt to notify us about the audio problems? I'm seeing a problem. Yep, question gone now. I think that was about the audio. Okay. I'll continue, and if I'm wrong, please let me know. So, what we've been trying to do in this project is we've been trying to answer the question: is it possible to implement this specification? It may seem like an unusual question because the specification is there to be implemented, to be turned into software. But the thing is, CURIO specification focuses on requirements and justification of the identified requirements, the way software is supposed to behave. So it doesn't include anything regarding the actual implementation. So that's what we're trying to do in this project, to provide feedback to the specification about its implementation process. And of course, the first step of implementation is to choose a technology. And to be honest, that is a section on its own. I'll try to go into the details of the technology choice. But whatever technology you choose, of course, you face the challenge of delivering acceptable performance, staying in a development project timeline, producing maintainable codes, extendable architecture, and allowing reuse. Now, a quite good move, in our opinion, for providing extension of code and reuse is, of course, to open source the project. So from the beginning, this project has been envisioned to be an open source project. So all the outputs in terms of code and tools will be made available, and the details will be managed by the NHS team. So I think you can, they'll be able to get back to you and provide you details regarding the actual outputs of the project when you want to have access to that. And speaking of tooling, while we mentioned tooling, one of the things we want to do with this project is deliver tooling whenever possible, because there are certain activities that everybody will have to repeat, quite likely, around implementation processes. So we try to turn them into reusable tools so that it would make it easier for others to follow our steps or to perform their own implementation. I'll go details into tooling too. And probably the most important thing that we're trying to do in this project is to create a community which is going to provide us technical and clinical input so that we can get the outputs to a better status. Now, trying to achieve this implementation, of course, we faced certain challenges. We had to deal with various challenges, and to begin with, of course, it's the technical issues. Based on the choice of technology, every implementation faces pretty much the same situation, where you have in every framework a set of out-of-the-box components, and in a moment you will see the layout and structure of the implementation of the widgets, and most of the time the specification describes components which are quite similar to the components that you would expect to find in any user interface technology framework. But, for example, when you have a table layout for a medication list, you do think that, okay, I have an existing component like a list, like a table view in technology X, which I may use to implement the CURIO specification. However, what happens is, what we've discovered is, you may be able to implement 90% of the functionality, but then you face an important piece of functionality that is not provided out of the box by existing components, and suddenly something that has gone very productive for 2 weeks hits a breakpoint, and then you end up going to a custom component and implementing a lot of functionality on your own, because you have to deliver that tricky functionality which isn't possible, or it's very hard to implement with the existing components. So the challenge is, one challenge is definitely mapping the requirements that you want to implement based on CURIO to the capabilities of the framework that you have chosen, and mapping the components functionality, the component capabilities. But that is not the only issue, of course. One thing that has caused a lot of work hours, that has cost us a lot of work hours in this project, is the relationship between the user interface, the behavior, and the supporting domain concepts. The specification focuses on explicit descriptions, on explicit requirements, like there needs to be a grid layout for successful implementation, a tooltip should appear here, you should have this kind of icons, etc. These are all directly technical requirements which you can easily map to existing frameworks, but there are certain descriptions in the specification which implicitly refer to concepts in the relevant clinical domains. Now, in order to implement the behavior described in the CURIO specification, common user interface specification, you have to resolve these references. In our case, we faced a little bit of a difficulty because this project on its own is disconnected from any clinical system that we may have here. Actually, we do not have a clinical system that we can use in the context of this implementation at CHIME, at UCL. So in our case, we faced a problem because we needed to connect to domain concepts to make the behavior work in the correct way in the user interface, but we didn't know how to provide that connection because we didn't have an actual clinical system running here. A choice, an option was of course to build a mock-up, something that mimics a clinical system so that we can connect the developed widgets to that, embedded in that, but that would be an extreme amount of work, and it wouldn't be a successful generalization of the existing systems because there are hundreds, if not thousands of systems out there. This is where we try to use the standards as a backend for our implementation, because relevant standards encapsulate domain information. They are generalizations of the common practices, or they are meant to be at the end. So in order to keep our implementation relevant, and also in order to connect to concepts, we decided to develop by targeting relevant standards, by using relevant standards whenever we can. This way, other applications, other clinical systems which are being used or are going to be developed can use the same standards, and hopefully that would allow better reuse or potentially more uses for the outputs of this project. I'll go into details of the kind of standards that we use, but one thing that I need to mention at this point is the architecture that we use. It is not possible, it's not a good approach to try to build a very technologically isolated monolithic implementation, even if it's a proof of concept implementation, because in real life there are many applications, some modern, some slightly older legacy systems, which use real-life architecture. So we thought that it may not be the case that someone is going to directly use a particular widget from this project, but maybe a tool used in this project or a backend service developed in CURIO project may be used by someone else. So we try to develop a loosely coupled architecture for providing the functionality, no matter how no matter how complex or simple a functionality is. And as a result, we have an implementation of the four controls, of the four widgets that we've included in the project scope. And I'll now try to give you actual demonstration of how they look and how they behave. Medication line is the component that we are using to display basically information about a particular drug. And it is challenging, the implementation challenge. What you should focus on when implementing this one is, for example, being able to process text. Because in order to display drug information, considering patient safety issues and all the analysis performed by the CURIO team, you need to manage the layout of text within this component in a quite precise way. There are other aspects of implementation, of course, but for all the widgets that I'll be covering, at least for the slides, I will go into their most interesting and challenging aspects. So you will see what medication line looks like in a second, but basically the most important thing about its implementation is managing text, because almost all the points in the CURIO specification regarding the implementation of this widget is about managing the layout of text, which I'll demonstrate to you in a second. Medication list is a grid type of, it's a list type of component which includes medication line in a cell, and it adds its own challenging features, its own useful features, which I will now try to demonstrate. Okay, If it all goes okay, then you should be able to see the screen now. If it's not easy to read in a second,